Welcome to The Velvet Murmur of Forgotten Springs, a soothing fantasy story crafted to guide you gently towards relaxation and sleep. If this tranquil journey resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more peaceful escapes like this one. Before we join the quiet scholar Caelan on his quest into the heart of the ancient Silverwood, we will begin with a short breathing guidance to help settle your mind and body. Should you wish to drift directly into the story, you can find timestamps for each chapter conveniently located in the description below. Please, find a position that feels truly comfortable for you right now. Allow your body to feel held and supported, whether you are lying down in bed or resting in a chair. Perhaps adjust your pillows or blanket, creating a cozy haven just for you. This moment is an invitation to release the day, letting go of any lingering thoughts or tensions. Prepare to immerse yourself in the gentle quiet of the Silverwood, where ancient trees whisper secrets and hidden waters hum with peace. Let us take a slow, calming breath together now. Inhale gently through your nose, feeling the air fill your lungs effortlessly, cool and clean like the forest air. And as you exhale, slowly and softly through your mouth, imagine releasing any tightness, any worry, like letting go of a heavy cloak. Feel the steady, easy rhythm of your own breath. With each inhale, draw in calm. With each exhale, let go of tension. Picture the soft, deep green moss of the Silverwood floor. Feel the cool, damp earth beneath your feet, and hear the faint, resonant hum of the forgotten springs calling you to peace. Notice the feeling of warmth beginning to spread through your limbs, a gentle heaviness inviting rest. If your mind wanders, simply acknowledge the thought without judgment, like watching a leaf drift down a slow stream, and gently guide your focus back to your breath or to the sound of my voice. There is nothing else you need to achieve right now but to rest and allow this story to unfold. Feel the gentle weight of relaxation settling over you, from the top of your head down to the tips of your toes. Imagine the velvet murmur of the springs washing over you, smoothing away the edges of the day, inviting deep, restorative calm. Allow yourself to become attuned to the quiet harmony of the forest. As we begin our journey with Caelan into the Silverwood, let the gentle magic of this place envelop you, carrying you softly towards a peaceful and serene slumber. Chapter 1. Whispers of the Silverwood. The edge of the Silverwood Forest did not loom, it beckoned. Caelan stood for a long moment, his worn leather satchel feeling less heavy on his shoulder than the quiet ache within his chest. Before him, the trees rose not in jagged menace, but as ancient, patient sentinels, their silvery gray bark seeming to hold the soft light of the late afternoon. The air, even here at the border, felt different, cooler, carrying the rich, complex perfume of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something evergreen, resinous and deeply calming. He took a breath, slow and deliberate, letting that scent fill him, a silent promise of the quietude he sought. He stepped beneath the first boughs, and the sounds of the outside world, the distant bleating of sheep, the rumble of a far-off cart seemed to fall away instantly, replaced by a profound hush. It wasn't silence, not truly, but a tapestry woven from gentler sounds. The sigh of a breeze high in the canopy, the almost imperceptible rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth, the soft thud of a pine cone falling onto moss. His boots, sturdy and well-traveled, made barely a whisper as they pressed into the thick, yielding carpet of emerald and teal moss that covered the forest floor. Sunlight, which had been bright and open in the meadows behind him, now filtered down in shifting columns and delicate traceries. It dappled the ferns and scattered wildflowers in unpredictable patterns, making the greens seem greener, the shadows deeper and softer. Caelan found himself slowing his pace without conscious thought, his scholar's habit of observation turning from texts and maps to the intricate life surrounding him. He noted the way ivy climbed a particular trunk, the precise curl of a fern frond unfurling, the iridescent sheen on a beetle's back as it navigated a fallen leaf. The path, such as it was, seemed less a deliberate track and more a suggestion, winding between the massive trunks of the silver-barked trees. He followed it deeper, drawn onward by a sense of peace that was already beginning to settle over him, like fine, cool mist. The air felt soft against his skin, carrying moisture and the scent of growth. He reached out occasionally, letting his fingers trail across the velvety surface of moss clinging to a low branch, or the surprisingly smooth texture of the silver bark itself. Each small contact seemed to ground him further in this tranquil realm. Hours seemed to melt away, marked only by the slow westward drift of the sunbeams through the leaves. Caelan felt the tension he habitually carried in his shoulders begin to ease, the tight knot beneath his ribs loosening almost imperceptibly with each soft footfall. He wasn't searching frantically, not yet. He was simply allowing the forest to welcome him, to absorb the quiet static of his grief. The lore spoke of finding the springs not through forceful seeking, but through patient listening and allowing oneself to be guided. As dusk began to thread purple and deep blue ribbons through the canopy overhead, Caelan found a small clearing, almost perfectly circular, beside a stream that moved so slowly it seemed barely to disturb the pebbles in its bed. The water made a gentle murmuring sound, a constant low sigh that complemented the forest's hush. The air here smelled particularly clean, with an added sweetness he couldn't quite place. It felt like the right place to rest, a pocket of perfect stillness within the larger quiet of the woods. He unrolled his simple bedroll onto a patch of moss that felt as soft as any mattress, the scent of crushed green things rising gently around him. He ate a simple meal of bread and dried fruit, watching as the last light faded and the first shy stars began to prick through the gaps in the leaves far above. The stream murmured its constant lullaby, a sense of profound weariness, but one tinged with peace, settled over him. He hadn't found the springs yet, but he had found this, a sanctuary, however temporary. Lying back, Caelan looked up at the intricate network of branches silhouetted against the deepening sky. He focused on the gentle sound of the water, letting it fill his awareness. He felt the cool night air on his face, the soft support of the moss beneath him, the slow, even rhythm of his own breathing. The weight he carried felt perhaps a fraction lighter, softened by the whispering embrace of the silverwood. Sleep, when it came, was not wrestled for, but arrived gently, like a leaf settling onto the quiet surface of the stream. Chapter 2. Following the Moss Paths. Caelan awoke slowly, not to a jarring noise, but to a gradual lightening of the world around him. Dawn in the Silverwood was less a sudden arrival and more a gentle unfurling, like a pale flower opening its petals. Soft gray light filtered through the canopy, painting the mist that hovered above the stream in pearlescent hues. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the intensified sense of damp earth and pine from the night's dew. Birdsong began tentatively, a few scattered chirps and whistles, gradually weaving into a soft, melodic chorus that felt less like an alarm and more like a gentle greeting. He sat up, feeling a sense of quiet refreshment he hadn't experienced in a long time. The deep aches of travel and the heavier burden of sorrow seemed muted this morning, held at bay by the profound peace of the clearing. He performed his morning rituals slowly, mindfully rolling his bedroll, washing his face in the icy clear water of the stream, eating a small portion of nuts and dried berries. Each action felt deliberate, unhurried, part of the forest's own calm rhythm. The stream continued its soft murmuring, a constant soothing presence. Unfolding his map, Caelan studied the faded symbols and meandering lines. It wasn't a precise chart, more a collection of impressions and landmarks gathered from fragmented texts, a uniquely shaped cluster of rocks, a tree struck by lightning long ago, and mentions of mosses with unusual textures or colors marking the way to the forgotten springs. He knew his search required observation, not just navigation. He needed to look at the forest, not just through it. Packing his few belongings, he felt a quiet sense of purpose settle over him. He set off from the clearing, choosing a direction that felt intuitively right, drawn towards a denser section of the woods where the light seemed softer, more diffused. He walked with deliberate slowness, his gaze sweeping the forest floor, the tree trunks, the low-hanging branches. He wasn't just looking for a path, he was looking for signs, for the subtle language of the Silverwood the lore hinted at. He ran his fingers across different types of moss. Some were coarse, some springy, some felt like dry velvet. He noted the patterns of fallen leaves, the direction ferns leaned, the way water pooled after the dew. Hours passed in this quiet, meditative exploration. The forest seemed to unfold before him, revealing small wonders. A patch of tiny, bell-shaped flowers, the color of amethyst, hidden beneath a broad leaf. A family of deer moving silently through the dappled light, their liquid eyes observing him calmly before they melted back into the trees. The intricate lace-like patterns of lichen on an ancient fallen log. He felt less like an intruder and more like a quiet guest, allowed to witness the forest's gentle life. It was mid-afternoon when he noticed it. On a series of smooth gray stones leading gently uphill, the moss grew differently. It was a deeper, richer green than any he had seen so far, and when he knelt to touch it, it felt impossibly soft, like stroking fine silk or the ear of a fawn. There was a coolness to it, too, that seemed to emanate from the stone beneath. Following the line of these stones with his eyes, he saw they formed a subtle, winding path leading deeper into the shadowed woods, a path he hadn't noticed before. A quiet excitement, gentle and hopeful, stirred within him. This felt significant, resonant with the fragmented descriptions in his texts. He placed his hand flat on one of the mossy stones, feeling the coolness seep into his palm, and a strange sense of pull, not physical but intuitive, urging him forward along this trail. It felt less like discovering a path and more like being invited onto one. The air along this route seemed even stiller, the light softer, the bird song more distant. He followed the mossy stones, each one a soft green beacon in the muted light. The path wound gently upward, leading him away from the stream and into a part of the Silverwood that felt older, quieter, more secluded. The trees here were immense, their silver trunks broader, their branches reaching higher, interlacing so densely overhead that only slivers of sky were visible. Yet it did feel oppressive. It felt profoundly peaceful, like stepping into a vast natural sanctuary. The scent of damp earth and moss was stronger here, mingling with a faint, almost floral sweetness he couldn't identify. He felt he was drawing closer. Chapter 3. The First Resonance. The path of soft green moss stones ended not abruptly, but gently, fanning out into a small, hidden dell. Caelan paused at the edge, breathing in the unique atmosphere of the place. Ancient trees, their silver bark almost completely obscured by thick cloaks of the same deep green moss, encircled a pool of water so clear it seemed like liquid crystal. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the intricate pattern of branches and the small patch of sky visible overhead, like a flawless mirror. No stream fed it, nor did any outlet seem to drain it. It simply was, a tranquil eye gazing upward from the forest floor. The air in the dell was noticeably cooler, yet possessed a strange, comforting quality. It hummed with a stillness that was more than just the absence of sound. And beneath that stillness, Caelan became aware of something else, something subtle and profound. It was a sound, yet not quite a sound. A vibration, perhaps, felt deep within his bones, resonating in the quiet air. It was a low, continuous hum, incredibly soft, with a texture that brought the word velvet to his mind, smooth, deep, and gentle. This, he knew instinctively, was the murmur of the forgotten springs. He walked slowly towards the edge of the pool, his footsteps utterly silent on the thick moss. The velvet hum seemed to grow slightly stronger as he approached, not in volume but in presence. It was a feeling as much as a sound, a resonance that seemed to meet him, welcoming him into the dell's embrace. The scent of wet stone mingled with that elusive, sweet fragrance, stronger now, perhaps from tiny, unseen blossoms hidden within the mossy banks. He knelt by the water's edge, the cool, damp moss compressing slightly beneath his knees. Looking into the pool, the water was so clear he could see the smooth, pale stones that lined its bottom. There was no sign of life within it. No fish, no insects, yet it felt intensely alive, vibrant with the gentle energy that hummed from its depths. Hesitantly, Caelan reached out and dipped his fingers into the water. It was cool, but not cold, and the moment his skin touched the surface, the velvet murmur intensified, not startlingly, but as if the spring acknowledged his presence. The vibration traveled up his arm, a gentle pulse that seemed to bypass his muscles and resonate directly with something deeper inside him. He felt a long-held tension, a knot of grief and weariness he hadn't even realized he was clenching so tightly, begin to soften and release. It was like the slow, gentle unfurling of a fist held tight for far too long. A sigh escaped his lips, unbidden, carrying with it a weight he hadn't known how to let go of. He hadn't expected such an immediate, profound effect. The lore spoke of soothing, of peace, but this felt like a homecoming, a return to a state of quiet equilibrium he had long forgotten. Caelan withdrew his hand slowly, the resonance fading slightly but leaving a lingering sense of deep calm in its wake. He remained kneeling by the pool, simply observing, listening, feeling. The velvet murmur wasn't just in the water. It filled the small dell, seeming to emanate from the mossy stones, the ancient trees, the very air itself. It wrapped around him like the softest blanket, insulating him from the outside world, creating a space of perfect tranquility. He watched as a single silver leaf detached itself from a high branch and spiraled slowly down, landing on the pool's surface without a ripple, floating there like a tiny boat on a sea of liquid quiet. The murmur continued its low, steady song, a sound that seemed to align his own inner rhythms, slowing his breath, calming his thoughts. He felt no urge to analyze, to categorize, only to be present in this unexpected sanctuary. He sat back against the mossy trunk of one of the ancient trees surrounding the pool. The bark felt cool and solid against his back, strangely comforting. Closing his eyes, he focused entirely on the velvet murmur, letting it wash over him, through him. It wasn't erasing the memories that caused his sorrow, but it felt as though it were smoothing their sharp edges, bathing them in a soft, compassionate light. Here, cradled by the ancient silverwood and the gentle resonance of the first spring, Caelan felt the first true stirrings of healing. Chapter 4. The Keeper of the Springs. Caelan remained by the first spring for a long time, perhaps hours, lost not in thought but in the simple sensation of being. The velvet murmur was a constant, gentle presence, a background hum against which the subtle sounds of the dell, the occasional rustle of a leaf, the distant call of a bird seemed only to deepen the profound quiet. He felt as if layers of old dust were being gently brushed away from his spirit, revealing something calmer, clearer beneath. He eventually opened his eyes, feeling rested in a way that sleep seldom provided anymore. It was then he realized he was no longer alone. Standing near the edge of the dell, partially merging with the shadows beneath a large fern, was a woman. She hadn't made a sound approaching. Her presence felt as natural and unobtrusive as the ancient trees themselves. She was clad in simple, earth-toned fabrics that blended seamlessly with the forest palette. Her face was serene, etched with the fine lines of time and kindness, and her eyes held the calm, steady gaze of someone deeply attuned to the rhythms of the natural world. She offered a gentle smile, radiating tranquility. "You found your way," she said, her voice soft, melodious, seeming to harmonize with the murmur of the spring. "Not many do. The paths are quiet ones." Caelan, startled but not alarmed, for there was nothing remotely threatening about her presence, inclined his head respectfully. "The moss showed me," he replied, his own voice hushed. "I am Caelan. I came seeking peace." "I am Maeve," she said, stepping further into the dell's soft light. "Peace finds those who are ready to listen for it here." She gestured towards the pool. "This is the first spring, the spring of quietude. Its murmur stills the troubled mind, like smoothing, wind-ruffled water." She moved closer to the pool, her bare feet making no sound on the moss. "The springs don't erase what troubles us, Caelan. They absorb the sharpness, the echo of the pain. They help us carry our burdens with lighter hearts." Maeve spoke of the springs not as magical artifacts, but as living entities, deeply interwoven with the health and spirit of the Silverwood. She explained how each spring held a slightly different resonance, a unique voice in the forest's quiet song. Some offered solace, others quiet joy, still others gentle acceptance. She had lived near them for decades, she explained simply, tending to the dells, listening to their murmurs, and occasionally offering quiet guidance to the rare travelers, like Caelan, who sought them with open hearts. "There are others," Maeve said, her gaze gentle, "if you wish to listen." She turned and began walking towards a barely perceptible opening between two of the large moss-covered trees, beckoning him to follow. Caelan rose, feeling the lingering calm of the first spring within him, and walked behind her, trusting her quiet certainty. She moved with an effortless grace, seeming to know instinctively where to place each footstep, disturbing nothing. She led him along another winding path, marked not by stones, but by the presence of tiny, pale blue flowers growing close to the ground, emitting an almost imperceptible sweet scent. The velvet murmur of the first spring faded behind them, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves and birdsong. After a short walk, they entered another dell. This one smaller, more enclosed, dominated by a single ancient willow whose branches swept down to touch the edges of a shallow, bubbling spring. Here the murmur was different, slightly higher in pitch, with a feeling not of velvet but perhaps of soft, flowing silk. It felt lighter, imbued with a gentle sense of release. "This is the spring of letting go," Maeve explained softly, kneeling beside the bubbling water. "Its resonance helps loosen the grip of things we hold on to too tightly, regrets, old anger, paths not taken." She dipped her cupped hand into the water and let it trickle through her fingers, the droplets catching the light like tiny diamonds. Caelan sat nearby, breathing in the unique atmosphere of this second sanctuary, feeling the silken murmur weave its way into his awareness, subtly different from the first, yet equally peaceful. Maeve didn't press him, simply sat in companionable silence, allowing him the space to experience the spring's gentle magic. Chapter 5. Echoes of Peace. Caelan spent the next few days enveloped in the profound tranquility of the Silverwood's hidden dells, guided by Maeve's gentle presence. She led him to a third spring, nestled deep within a rocky outcrop where ferns grew thick and luminous. Fungi cast a soft, ethereal glow. This spring's water flowed slowly over smooth, dark stones, and its murmur was the lowest yet, a deep, resonant hum that felt like the quiet breathing of the earth itself. It imparted a sense of grounding, of deep-seated stability and acceptance. Maeve called it the spring of roots, for it helped one feel connected and steady. He didn't follow a strict schedule. Sometimes he would sit for hours by a single spring, simply listening, feeling the subtle shifts within himself as the velvet, silken, or earthy resonance washed over him. Other times he would wander slowly between the dells, observing the quiet life of the forest under Maeve's unobtrusive companionship. She shared her knowledge of the plants, the birds, the subtle signs of the changing light, teaching him to read the forest's gentle language. He learned to identify bird calls, to recognize edible berries, to understand the way the wind whispered differently through pine and silverwood branches. He began sketching again, something he hadn't felt inclined to do for a long time. In his worn journal, he drew the curve of a fern frond, the texture of moss on stone, the way light fell on the surface of the spring water. These weren't the precise technical drawings of his scholarly past, but softer, more impressionistic renderings, attempts to capture the feeling, the peace of the place. He found a quiet joy in this simple act of observation and creation, a gentle reawakening of a part of himself he thought lost. Maeve would often sit nearby while he sketched or simply rested, sometimes weaving small baskets from pliable twigs, sometimes simply gazing into the trees with a look of serene contentment. They spoke occasionally, their conversations drifting like leaves on the slow stream, sharing observations about the forest, fragments of old lore Maeve remembered, or simply comfortable silences filled only by the murmur of the springs and the sounds of nature. Caelan never felt pressured to speak of the grief that had brought him here, but he felt Maeve understood it nonetheless, her empathy as palpable and gentle as the forest air. Gradually, Caelan felt a profound shift within him. The heavy weight of sorrow hadn't vanished entirely, but it no longer defined the landscape of his inner world. It felt lighter, softer, integrated into the whole of him rather than consuming it. The sharp edges had been smoothed by the resonant waters, the constant ache quieted by the forest's deep peace. He felt a sense of quiet clarity, an acceptance of the past, and a gentle hope for the future he hadn't thought possible. The springs hadn't offered escape, but transformation. One morning, waking beside the spring of quietude, Caelan knew it was time to leave. There was no sadness in the thought, only a quiet readiness. He had found more than he had sought, not just the legendary springs, but a connection to the gentle rhythms of the natural world and a pathway back to himself. He found Maeve tending to a patch of the tiny blue flowers that marked the paths between the dells. He told her of his decision, expressing his deep gratitude. She smiled, her eyes kind. "The spring's murmur travels with you now, Caelan," she said softly. "Listen for it in the quiet moments. The peace you found here resides within you, too." She pressed a small, smoothly polished stone from the edge of the first spring into his hand. It felt cool and carried a faint echo of the velvet resonance. "A reminder," she whispered. He walked back towards the edge of the silverwood along the mossy paths, but this time he walked differently. His steps were lighter, his gaze softer, his heart filled not with emptiness but with a quiet, resonant peace. The forest seemed to bid him a gentle farewell, the sunlight filtering through the leaves like a blessing. As he stepped out from under the ancient trees, the murmur of the springs faded from his ears, but he could still feel its echo deep within, a steady, quiet hum beneath the surface of the world, a promise of peace carried onward.